Analysis of national current affairs. Freshly pressed.
Studio silence, mics are up. And a good morning to you once more, Lagos. You're tuned in and listening to Smooth Breakfast on Smooth 98.1. We are your Love Music, Love Life station. And right now it's 7:30, which means it's time for detailed newspaper analysis inside our Freshly Pressed. Joining me in the studio this morning, I've got, unusually for a Tuesday, because I did drag her in from her run, Miss Ireti Bakare-Yusuf. Good morning, Miss Ireti.
Call me the unusual one.
Hey, I like it. I like it. Very snazzy. And I've also got Ikemesit Effiong in the studio. Good morning, Ikemesit.
Good morning. Drum roll for the OAP of the year.
Hey,
Yes, double.
Double. Yeah. The Eloy and then
Okay.
We don't just
win.
win once.
Thank you.
We
That's
win
not what
twice.
Freshly Pressed is for, but
Yeah.
thank you so much.
We can
And,
analyze that though.
And we've got Fred, who is the least troublesome of the three in the studio. Good morning, Fred. Allison, how you doing?
We're with royalty.
There you go. I
Exactly.
like it. I like it. Okay, so Lagos, as we delve into this morning's stories, do join us in conversation. Use the hashtag FreshlyPress981 while you tweet at us at Smooth981FM. And of course, you can send in messages to our WhatsApp number as well, which is 0809 444 0981. So first up on the list, let's talk about updates on the ASUU Strike, shall we? Ikemesit, coming to you for this one. Lecturers have walked out of a meeting with a government delegation. Now, according to our Minister of Labour and Employment, Dr. Chris Ngige, he's saying that despite this walkout, we're still talking, we're still in conversation. When people come out of a meeting smiling, somebody has cheated somebody. So that they've walked out doesn't mean that there's anything necessarily wrong. But Ikemesit, things have been going wrong in our education system for a long time, and ASUU have been on indefinite strike since the 4th of November. What are your thoughts on this story?
Yeah, indeed. As a matter of fact, I barely made it in, right, for the show, and that gave the producer a few tantrums, right?
Yes,
Deep down,
give us
yeah,
that take.
yeah, in large part because I dropped my younger brother at the airport, who's been home with me for the entire duration of the strike because he's a final year, I was getting ready for his exams, and then as we sprung this, the manner of the walkout though was pretty significant, right? So
Okay.
literally the Chris Ngige, the Minister of Labour and Employment, kept the ASUU delegation in for an hour. The meeting started at 5. The government delegation came in at 6. He gave his wonderful speech about focusing on the critical demands of the union. He talked about the salary shortfall, revitalization of universities, earned allowances of lecturers, basically off and on what ASUU has been agitating for the better part of 2 decades.
Exactly.
That part I know. As soon as he was done with his pretty joyful speech, the ASUU delegation just stood up. They left. They didn't even leave a comment. They didn't even leave a comment
So
with the media and with the press.
yes.
So ASUU looks set to dig in. They understand that the government's under pressure. Public opinion is somewhat on their side, even though most people in general have a very low opinion about unions in the country in general. But ASUU understands one thing, right? This government will only really pay attention to any issue that is put forward at the front, that is at the front burner of the conversation and can be used by the opposition as a political weapon because it's an election year, right? Yeah. So ASUU has been having these conversations with the government off and on for the better part of 2 years, at least during the lifetime of the Buhari administration, and there has been very little headway. Now it seems Ngige is now available for weekly meetings, So yeah. But this looks set to drag, and this looks set to drag for a while. But in all of this, the people who keep losing out are brothers and sisters and children who are in school. Yeah.
Thank you very much, that Ikemesit. Really sad stuff there, and I certainly hope, I'm sure, along with a number of other people, that something will be resolved soon. Up next, though, speaking of resolutions, from the New Telegraph, evidence shows that Eni and Shell knew of Nigerian bribes, according to an Italian judge. So she found on Monday that the oil groups Eni and Royal Dutch Shell were fully aware that their 2011 purchase of Nigerian oil fields would result in corrupt payments to certain politicians and officials. Now, the ever controversial OPL 245 was bought by Eni and Shell for about 1.3 billion US dollars, but it was a deal that spawned one of the country's largest corruption scandals. $1.1 billion of the total was siphoned to agents and middlemen. So far, there have been 2 convictions, Nigerian, Emeka B, and Gianluigi Dinardo. Both were middlemen, however, but it was interesting what the judge said. She did note that it wasn't a mere connivance, but a conscious adhesion to a predatory project damaging the Nigerian state. Over to you, Fred.
Yeah, so when I saw this, I had to, research what was going on. What's all this uproar about
It's illegal.
this block? I found out that this block is actually like one of the biggest
The most
reserve
lucrative, yes.
in Africa. It had 9 billion barrels, and at the time when we're doing $100 a barrel, you can imagine that was almost $1 trillion worth of assets, right? And it's so I guess any is like the largest producer in Africa. Shell is the biggest foreign investors. For them to continue to position themselves, this wouldn't have made sense to grab their hand in it, but there's just as you said. So first off, who will be willing to give 1.1 billion, in bribes and all of that? They just wanted this asset. Obviously, we are the short end of the stick, the Nigerian government and the Nigerian
people, because it's we're the ones who are being shortchanged here quite a huge amount, and just goes to show the way that business is being done, which is why this is such a big issue as well. But I know that this is so the trial for the Nigerian and the Italian that so far were convicted, the middlemen. The companies, Shell, have done their very best to separate themselves from those individuals, saying that neither Obi nor Donado worked for Shell, and there's no basis to convict itself or any of its former staff of alleged offences related to the oil deal. But I wonder what your thoughts are on that, knowing that they are being accused and there is still a main trial that's going on internationally.
Yeah. So they said until the main trial before the facts actually come out. So I guess they're still trying to play face off or trying to save face. Well, obviously from what the judge said, they were aware, and it's hard to actually say they weren't aware that this was going to happen, because kind of back in the day before all this before these practices were actually clamped down, you kind of knew you had to work your way through government to get the lucrative deals on the ground, and this being the biggest reserve block. So anyway, I guess as it unfolds, we'll find out more things in regards to Shell and in this position.
All right, thank you. We will find out more things. That's the way the cookie crumbles. Speaking of crumbling cookies and not touching cookies not meant for you, Guardian newspaper has got this headline: Professor in OAU has the sex for mark scandal, bags 6 years jail term.
Dun,
So,
dun, dun.
I know we've been following this story quite closely. Obviously, I know it is one that's of close concern to you. But Professor Richard Ayola Akindele has been given 6 years imprisonment for demanding sex for his student to pass, Monica Osage. Now we should note that initially his plea was not guilty. He did change his plea, confessing and saying, I am guilty of this. And the judge who was overseeing this case, Justice Onyetu, was particularly harsh. That's what the way that it's phrased, because she says this kind of issue is too rampant in our tertiary institutions. We send children to school, they come home telling us that lecturers want to sleep with them. We cannot continue like this. Somebody has to be used as an example. Even primary school pupils are complaining. So it is time for the court to start upholding the right of these children, especially female students. The case is endemic.
And this is where I must tell you, and I don't know whether you're going to agree with me, and to be honest, I really don't care, but God is a woman. God is a female, honestly. If there's one person that needed or would have prayed, I don't get a female judge, it would have been Akindele, but he did. And, we thank God for that. And even more so is, you can tell this story here, the way the Guardian have covered it. It's been written by a man, because that's why they're using the word harsh. She wasn't harsh.
Yes.
She spoke as a citizen. She spoke as a mother. She spoke as a judge. She spoke as a lawmaker. She spoke as somebody that's frankly as fed up as the rest of us. How dare you call her harsh? I think the fact that she even gave them the opportunity to sort of present their plea bargaining, but she has the right, and like she said, it's not sacrosanct. The court doesn't have to agree to that. She had a right to turn it down, and she did, and she gave her reasons, and she did say, look, sorry, when the guy, the the lawyer for
Okay.
Akindele,
Yeah.
yes, he said, he said the council further told the court that the plans are ongoing to make the offices of the lecturers open by building the front side with glass at OAU. The judge responded, I mean, really, honestly, she's my
It's a
hero.
great
She
response.
said, do you think they do it in the office? They go to the hotel. You
Mm.
silly man, she wanted to say.
But something else
I
I
will
wanted
add for her.
to note here is that she did have an option to have these jail terms run concurrently or consecutively, and she chose concurrently, which means that despite the fact that she sentenced the convict to 24 months on one count, 24 months on count 2, 1 year on count 3, and 1 year on count 4, which sounds like it would be 6 years. It's actually 2 years. That
Because
going
he's
to
only
serve.
going to actually spend 2 years in
Yes.
jail, but he actually does get sentenced for 6 years.
Yes,
Now,
yes.
this is why I'm saying that this story was obviously written by a man,
Mm.
because he says she's harsh. If it were me, he would have to serve everything all at once.
Consecutively.
Absolutely all at once. And this is also the other thing. We need more judgments like this. That's why this case is important. We need more judgments like this. We need fearless judges. We need judges who are going to think from the side of the survivor, not so much from the side of the lecturer, or or the attacker or the perpetrator. The one thing we do know is that Professor Akindele is a sexual pervert, and for that he must go to jail, and we celebrate him going to jail.
Alright.
At least hopefully he won't be able to teach.
Okay.
We're gonna need sex records. What do you call it? Sex offenders
List.
register.
Register.
Absolutely, we
Yeah.
haven't got that yet, so there's still a long way to go, but this is a good start, and this is a celebratory one.
Thank you. Ikemesit, as a learned colleague in the studio, I was just going to ask about judges granting sentences consecutively versus concurrently. What usually, or in your opinion, do you think might be the deciding factor to choose?
So
how
yeah,
the sentence
so
will
it
run?
typically depends on the gravity of the offense and the length of the sentence. So
Typical.
so you would think that for a conviction on that on these charges,
Mhm.
that,
Which, by
that
the way,
leads
carries 5
to-
years.
Yeah,
It actually
exactly,
carries 5 years, a
exactly,
maximum
yeah,
of 5 years
yeah,
by law.
exactly. Considering the length of time, it's a felony. You would think maybe if she wanted to pass a stronger message, she could literally have
Yes.
she could literally have allowed it to run consecutively.
yeah,
At least in the
okay.
southern states,
Yes.
in the country, judges have a lot more liberty and a lot
Okay.
more discretion as to determine whether sentences run consecutively.
Thank
or
you,
concurrently.
thank you. So really, Justice Maureen Oyetenu did speak very well, but she actually was rather considerate of the man. Maybe he was.
Yeah.
We move on though. Up next, it's a story that has got everybody buzzing. Thisday newspaper: Access Diamond Bank's merger to be finalized first half of 2019. Ikemesit, I think the real conversation that people are having is
I heard
whether
your question.
it is a merger or an acquisition. Now, according to the article that we have taken the story from, we do know that the board of Diamond Bank did select Access as a preferred bidder. We also know that they will be assuming some of the shares, things like that, even though on the stock exchange, Diamond Bank will essentially cease to exist, and it will cease to exist as its own independent entity. It will be assumed into Access. So it does appear to be an acquisition. What are your thoughts on the story, though?
It is an acquisition, right?
Is it like a management
yeah,
buyout?
yeah, it is. It is an acquisition, right? And it is an acquisition for the simple fact that by the time this is complete in the first half of next year, Diamond Bank will essentially cease to exist as a legal entity. There is, I read the statements from both banks. There is nothing to indicate that. There's nothing to indicate that there will be any. I mean, that the new entity that will be formed from the merger in parentheses. I mean, literally Lagos. You need to see my eyes while I'm doing this. There is nothing to indicate that the name of the new entity will not be Access Bank. I think
Exactly.
it will be
It
Access
will be
Bank.
I don't
So
think
there
Access are going to lose that brand.
No,
they're
they
not.
aren't. But
No access to diamonds.
yeah,
no
they-
accessing diamonds.
yeah,
Like, you
diamond
could kind of
accessibility.
like I heard someone say on Twitter yesterday. Apparently, diamonds don't live forever. But then that's by the way.
Wow.
That's by the way. That's by the way.
That's
But
a good
yeah,
one.
yeah. But here's the interesting thing, right? This is a merger that makes sense. This is an acquisition, right?
Thank
you.
you.
That makes sense, right? You've got Diamond, which is very strong on customer care, very strong on retail. You've got Access,
And they're
Very aggressive on
yeah,
retail.
and
They're
very,
aggressive
very,
on trade.
very,
They're very
aggressive
fearless, actually.
on retail. Probably have the best, customer service.
And I think their
offerings
strategy,
in
they
the
look how
industry.
they've grown so rapidly.
So rapidly,
in very
right?
short
Yes,
time.
within a very short period of time. You've got Access, which has got a very, very good brand and is very strong in terms of its financial fundamentals, this does make sense. It would appear that the majority shareholders in Diamond, the Dozier family, right, want to move on to other things. And like I was telling a couple of persons, they have also gotten in quite interesting places like MTN, for example, which, please let's face it, is a massive cash cow, right? And when you look at the fact that margins in banking, while they're sitting pretty well, they're shrinking in relative terms. And the telcos are going to be moving into the banks.
And
turf
this is
with
it.
the
And
payment
I
service
think
banks.
this is part of what happened with Diamond. I think what Diamond was ambitious without actually having the infrastructure and the finance to back up that ambition. And they were ambitious in a space that was already a threat, given all the pest analysis around them.
And there are a lot of entrenched players. The point is this: with the way modern and contemporary living is moving, we're essentially transiting
We're
out of
streamlining everything.
we're transiting out of traditional banking. And what that happens oftentimes when the transition occurs is that the small players get winnowed out, and then you've got a few big,
Which is
strong
why you must keep an eye on
players.
access, because look at the Accelerate TV. It's not just about TV, you know. It's not just about TV.
I'm very happy. I'm a
we could
shareholder,
discuss
and I'm going to
this.
be a little richer. So
Yeah.
yeah.
You're going to be able to buy me a Christmas present.
I'm just using that to shade all of
Buy
you.
all of us
Money
Christmas
there.
present.
Very interesting. Yes, please. We are expecting those Christmas presents, very frankly speaking. Okay, we've got a few messages that are coming through, so I'm going to take some of these up on WhatsApp. We've got Fred from Ikoyi who says we should have a Me Too movement in Nigeria. We do. It's called No More. Mr. Ireti as
Thank
championing
you.
that. Says especially for university students to name and shame lecturers who've abused them. For past university students, he says it was a plague in my time at university. Says Fred from Ikoyi. Thank you. Tosi from Ikoyi says harsh judgments. I quickly had to check the meaning of harshu. We need more judgments like this. That was passed on, Professor Akindele. We celebrate the judgment. He got served. Please, can he be served some more?
Yes.
Wow. Well, Olatumosu says, I'm still searching for one achievement or development of this administration. I'm yet to see it. This government is a failure. Okay, Olatumosu, that doesn't refer specifically to a story, so no. While Williams from Lagos says, regards a sex for mark issue, I really like this development of fair judgment. Nevertheless, let our students be serious with their studies and stop giving lecturers any impression that they are naive and academically incapacitated.
I beg your
Says
pardon.
Williams, I'm not really sure what you're alluding to.
You might want to check me on Twitter.
I'm
with
not
that.
sure. Not
Let's
sure.
discuss.
Okay.
That sounds
and
like
then-
you need educating, William.
And then Yinka asks, if you like, dodge the question for you, but what happens to those that want salary for life? Will they be moved to MTN airtime for life? Yinka, I'm not the person to answer that question.
Access
I think,
people issue us.
I think the customer service lines you can call for that. But thank you. Okay, moving on next. Let's talk about the Paris Club refund. Fred, this is an interesting story. The Attorney General of the Federation disobeys Buhari's order to pay consultants $350 million fee. That's what the headline is telling us. What the details are telling us is that even beyond there being a presidency directive to the AGF to cough out the sums of money, that a court has also ordered the AGF to pay out the money to all those who toiled to compute the amount due each state and local government to the country as a result of the refund loan, which the OBJ administration unilaterally deducted from them and paid out in order to get debt relief from the powerful European financial group. What a conundrum. And allegations, according to the paper again, that there are findings that the Accountant General is relying on a contradictory oral directive given to him by the chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum and governor of Zamfara State, Abdulaziz Yari, not to release the $350 million set aside for consultant fee without clearance by him. Well, Fred, what are your thoughts?
You've kind of said it all. So,
It's a bit dramatic. I mean, first of all, it is an allegation. What do you think of that?
So he has a verbal directive not to pay this thing, and he has several formal directives to actually pay the fees, and he's refusing to do that, pending that he has formally reached out to the Attorney General in regards to what he should do, what is his next line of actions.
I mean, but do you think we should believe the report that there is a verbal directive, because we can't prove that? from the governor. I mean, am I incorrect in mentioning that?
No.
Yeah, you are now. So, but it's
She's
I don't
incorrect.
I just don't even know what to say in this because you have and at the end of the article they said they are actually following they're fully complying with the relevant directives and the guidelines for public expenditures and payments.
For what did we learn in school about verbal versus written directives? Which trumps which?
A written directive will always trump. Perhaps, and I also wonder, could this be maybe a concern that's being put out by concerned parties and newspapers, considering that the elections are coming up, and maybe there is a general fear that the pace of payment is slow. Could that be it?
But okay, so this let me try and give him like a win somewhere, So this is supposed to be taken away from monies that's supposed to go to the state, the local government, and the state. So it could be that you're really concerned about the people, and making sure that we're not shortchanged. Although there's a court order, so there's a garnishing order that requires that the federal government the federal government and the central bank pay this monies before it goes to the state and the local government. So let's just give him let's just say that he's considerate of the people and saying that
there is a presidential directive. The Attorney General has written a letter. A court issued an order to the effect that you should pay this, and the chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum said you should not pay without clearance from me. Really? You're trying to give him a win out of that?
Well, because we still don't know. Like I said, we still don't know that there was necessarily a verbal directive. It was just.
But why would he have the?
So the chairman of the NGF would outrank constituted authorities of state. It speaks to the institutional weakness that we continue to deal with in the country.
Yes,
it's a huge thing.
Okay, Ikemesit, since you're speaking, let's go back to you now. The NCAA is probing Air Peace's oxygen mask saga. Last Friday, the passengers on board the Lagos Enugu flight, Air Peace, were thrown into turmoil. They were quite panicked because there was a depressurization issue while they were in flight, and as a result, we're told that the aircraft had to maneuver to a reasonable level so that the passengers could breathe relatively easily. And this again being because the oxygen masks failed in a number of cases, or they weren't working, and that's a big issue because it then led people to say, well, are these aircraft actually operating in Nigeria? Are they airworthy? Are they fit to fly? Because we had an emergency situation, and according to witnesses and passengers on board, even the cabin crew were being affected, obviously, by the depressurization issue. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, naturally, because the cabin crew are human beings and they also, bringing the same oxygen that we do.
Yes, but we know cabin crew usually do their best to stay calm.
Stay
so if you
calm
see a panicked cabin crew member, everything is gone.
He's in Nigeria. If you see a panicked cabin crew, he's in Nigeria.
Yeah, but you're gonna agree with me that all training goes out the door when you're losing oxygen.
When your license,
Absolutely.
So kudos to the NCAA. They're going to investigate it. It's worth noting, though. I think we should, while commending the regulators for moving speedily to address this, it's also good for us to have some context, right? In relatively few years, it's been relatively safe to fly in Nigeria. We've got a level 3 rating from the International Civil Aviation Organization, while level 3 out of 4. There are only 3 countries in the world, and the United States, for example, is in one of them. That's a level 4 rating, right?
Sure, Singapore is one of them.
Singapore,
yes,
yeah, they are.
I'm sure they are.
I want
to live in their airport. But carry on.
So do I.
It's one of the most beautiful.
Yeah, you guys check that on YouTube. Yeah, so it's worth noting, and aviation is highly and tightly regulated. In fact, some might argue it is over-regulated, especially in terms of the amount of taxes that these operators have to deal with. And so, but in terms of safety, we've done a lot better than we used to in the past. So it will be interesting to see what particular lapses remain in the industry and in the organizational
to ensure
so,
it doesn't happen again. That's the question.
Yeah. So that's the question that the investigation will find out. How is it that this particular plane was able to pass safety test, but then in an actual emergency,
it was
the oxygen
probably
mask
used
didn't work?
back in the 19th century in Russia.
That's not necessarily
because we do have to know. Sorry, can I just make some points?
Yeah.
You do have to know that Air Peace, and they have said this, and it is true because we have seen the work that they're trying to do, even with Boeing directly, They say that they have one of the most, hang on, let me use the exact quote here. But basically, they work with one of the most expensive sort of air check processes in the world, one of the best facilities, in the world. And they do have a reputation of spending millions on their C-check exercises, which are very important safety exercises. So there was a problem with that plane, and investigations must find out
That
why.
is such a
Indeed,
broad
indeed,
statement.
indeed,
What can you
indeed,
please
indeed.
name
And-
these
and
best people
Yeah, and
they're
then
working with?
December 10th, they just got a certificate of airworthiness. So
Absolutely.
Indeed, and this particular aircraft passed a mandatory maintenance check in September of last year. So something happened within the
Something went
process,
wrong.
and there is a problem within the process.
I mean, that happened with Boeing.
and that's what the
Absolutely. So
investigation.
if that could happen with a Boeing plane where it resulted in all lives being lost on board, where there was a slight error
Yes.
that they didn't notice,
Yeah.
we do know that these things can happen. So
Indeed.
what's important now is that we do get feedback from the NCAA once these investigations have been carried out.
And they have promised to pass it on to the public.
They must do. They
Yeah.
must do. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining in that one. But it's very important. Air safety and safety actually is quite important. But Fred, up next, whistleblower. The EFCC say that the whistleblower policy is paying off. I have not yet received my millions, but that's okay. We'll carry on. They say that the substantial part of 500 billion naira recovered by the commission has been through the whistleblower policy. Fred, I'm just going to let you take this story.
yeah, so I guess this is one of the big wins for this government, instituting the whistleblowing policy, which, as EFCC has said, has resulted to most of the substantial of the recoveries that they've had so far. I just, I don't know, I haven't followed through to find out if the whistleblowers actually get their compensation and if they get it on time though. But they're just encouraging more people to engage in this policy that exists, and it's a legal, legitimate way to actually, earn money. I guess, and in the article going forward, Falani claims that he is given, he is whistleblown, and he hasn't had the government act on it. So he's encouraging the government and the FCC to actually act on all.
So now we're all gonna go digging in our friends, in our neighbors' dustbins, because I want to know what Ikemesit is up to. I want to know what Folu's up to.
No, I don't want you
I
to know
wish
what I'm
I
up
could
to.
find out information about Cheta.
And
That would work, wouldn't it?
You have a checklist.
Yeah.
You're scary.
They say
know.
whistleblowing. You think I don't want to make money?
All the stocks
Forget
you're
it.
talking
Listen,
about
we're
is
all
Access
Okay.
Bank stocks, right?
Yes,
how did
now,
how did
exactly.
he get it?
Ah, come on.
Diamond
Ah,
Bank,
come on,
yes.
guys. Come on,
Let's
guys.
keep
Come on,
those
guys.
institutions out of it.
Folu coming in
Thank you.
fancy shirts
But
on a
thank you.
Tuesday.
Thank you very
Don't
much.
shame
Yes, Fred,
these
we're
guys.
keeping an eye on you, Mr. FB Allison. You see your fancy bling from time to time. Okay, but thank you very much for that. Let's quickly move on now. Thisday newspaper is where our final story is. Mr. Ireti, I'm going to come to you for this one now. It's quite an announcement. Lagos launches what they claim to be Nigeria's biggest health insurance scheme today. Now we're being told that it is for residents, all residents, to access basic healthcare from a contributory pool of funds. Now it does require people to enroll. They're looking at an enrollment of at least 2.5 million residents in 2019, with a projection to reduce health issues by 10%. Now these are quite bold,
Ambitious.
yes, it's very
Yes,
ambitious. Mr. Ireti,
reducing
of course.
10% by 10%. That's really
that's
ambitious.
ambitious,
I mean, if you can reduce the at least if you take the infant mortality rate and you take maternal death rates, and you can
Yeah.
reduce it, and you're sure you can. That really, if you can reduce it 10% every year, would be gosh, God knows where we'll be in like 3 years. So I'm not impressed by that, because like this, in Nigeria the proof is in the eating, not even in the pudding. It's in the eating. However,
yes.
However, what is important is that they are starting this this health care scheme, or the health insurance scheme. I like it very much. So you have three. You have basic health, private health, and the general health. You also have where civil servants have 75% of it contributed by the employer, which is the state, and 25% taken from their salaries. You have the lower, the how do you say, the lower members, financial members of our, the informal sector,
Yes,
of us,
yes.
the government is contributing the majority of this and they're putting it into a fund. I like it. I like the fact that they haven't made it optional. They've made it mandatory. I think it is important. Healthcare, healthcare, healthcare. But we also forget something. Healthcare is one of the single most expensive costs of any nation. It's part of where
it is.
our taxes come from. And if we're paying so much tax already in Lagos State, why are we still having to contribute?
Just in 20 seconds, there's a quick point also of enforceability, right? So there are a lot of federal government workers in the states have been enforcing with them, private sector employees have been.
Well, I guess you'll
So
have
it'll
to
be
get a
interesting to see
card.
whether
You'll
they
have to
built
get a
the
card. You know, you have the Lagos
Yeah.
State residents,
Yeah.
residence card and stuff. I guess
Alright.
I'm
Very
exploring
beautiful.
something like that.
Thank you very
Which
much.
I don't
Thank
have.
you very much,
Exactly.
Ireti. I appreciate you coming in today. I know it is out of your regular schedule, and thank you very much to Ikemesit and Fred as well. We certainly appreciate you. I'll round up with a couple of messages as we are just over time. Emmanuel sent a message on WhatsApp to say cabin depressurization is an occurrence for which there are established procedures. The passenger panic played a huge part in this particular scenario. People must listen to cabin crew briefings a lot more attentively. And that's an important point to note. While we've got a topic line saying lecturers of tertiary institutions should see themselves as men of honor and role models to their students, I celebrate the judgment granted against the unscrupulous lecturer, as it will set a good example to others. Thank you very much. But do stick around. We're going to move on to a lighter note. At 8:15, we'll be talking entertainment inside the grapevine, and we've got a gorgeous lady by the name of Ebi-san in the studio with us today. She's got a new video out, so we'll talk about it in just a bit.